98%. That is the statistical probability that if you were standing in the tall grass of the East African Rift Valley 2 million years ago, you would end your day inside the stomach of something else. Imagine you were there right now, feeling the humid air press against your skin. You are naked, hairless, and remarkably slow. To your left, a thicket of acacia trees shivers, though there is no wind. You hear a low, vibrating hum that isn't a sound so much as a physical pressure against your chest. It's the infrasonic growl of a predator that has already decided you are its next meal. You have no claws to slash with, no fangs to bite with, and no armor to protect your soft, exposed throat. You are essentially a walking calorie pack, a slow-moving, poorly defended protein source in a world governed by teeth and muscle. By every law of biology, you should not exist. The fossil record suggests that for the vast majority of our history, humans were not the masters of the wild, but its most frequent victims. We were the prey. But you are still standing here. We like to tell ourselves a story of ancient glory, a narrative where we stepped onto the savannah and immediately began to dominate the landscape with our superior minds. The reality is far more terrifying and much more humbling. Before we were the kings of the world, we were the bottom of the food chain, clinging to survival by a thread so thin it's a miracle it never snapped. We spent nearly 2 million years running, hiding, and watching our kin disappear into the shadows. We were biologically broken, outmatched in every physical category that matters in a fight for life. And yet, the very things that should have made us extinct became the foundation of our global conquest. To understand how we survived, we have to look at the monsters that nearly wiped us out, and the radical, desperate adaptations we used to turn the tables. The grass was a trap. The first thing you have to understand is that the predators of the Pliocene and Pleistocene were not like the ones we see in nature documentaries today. Modern lions and leopards are dangerous, certainly, but they are the survivors of a world we already broke. The creatures our ancestors faced were larger, faster, and more specialized in the art of killing primates. Take Dinophelus, often called the false saber-tooth. It was a cat the size of a jaguar, but built with the heavy, powerful forelimbs of a bear. In the 1980s, paleontologist C.K. Brain conducted a groundbreaking study at the Swartkrans Cave in South Africa. He found thousands of bones belonging to Australopithecus, our early ancestors. For decades, researchers thought these caves were homes for ancient humans. Brain proved they were actually the refuse piles of Dinophelus. He found skulls with 2 distinct puncture marks in the cranium, holes that perfectly matched the canine teeth of these massive cats. We weren't living in those caves. We were being dragged into them like groceries. We were biologically outclassed in every way. If you compare a human to any other mammal of similar size, our physical stats are embarrassing. A chimpanzee, our closest living relative, is roughly 4 times stronger than an average human male of the same weight. They have dense muscle fibers and a skeletal structure designed for explosive power. A chimp can tear a limb from a socket. A human struggles to open a stubborn jar. We are also painfully slow. The fastest human in history, Usain Bolt, reached a top speed of about 27 miles per hour. A leopard can hit 50. A saber-tooth could likely hit 40 in a few seconds. If a predator decided to chase you on open ground, the race was over before it began. We couldn't even climb to safety very effectively. As we evolved for upright walking, we lost the opposable big toes that allowed our ancestors to grip branches. We were stuck on the ground, visible from miles away, and incapable of outrunning anything that wanted to eat us. The monsters were everywhere. It wasn't just the cats. Imagine a bird standing 10 feet tall with a beak the size of a sledgehammer. These were the Forus racidae, or terror birds. While they were more common in South America, they represented a terrifying reality for early primates. Predators that could look you in the eye while you stood upright. These birds didn't just peck. They used their massive hooked beaks to strike downward with the force of an axe, shattering the skulls of their prey instantly. In the water, there were crocodiles twice the size of modern Nile crocs, waiting at the only places humans could get a drink. In the air, giant raptors like Stephanoides maheri, the Malagasy crowned eagle, were large enough to swoop down and snatch a human child right off the ground. This isn't a hypothetical threat. The Tong child, a famous 2.8 million-year-old skull of Australopithecus africanus, bears the unmistakable marks of eagle talons in its eye sockets. We were being hunted from the land, the sea, and the sky. But we had one hidden advantage: in our guts. For a long time, scientists couldn't figure out how we survived this period of extreme vulnerability. The answer lies in something called the expensive tissue hypothesis, proposed by Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler in 1995. They noticed a strange trade-off in human evolution. Our brains are massive energy hogs, consuming about 20% of our daily calories, despite being only 2% of our body weight. To afford such a big brain, evolution had to take energy away from something else. That something was our digestive tract. We have much smaller guts than other primates, but a small gut can only process high-quality, calorie-dense food. This created a desperate feedback loop. We needed high-quality food to fuel the brains that would help us avoid being eaten. But to get that food, we had to go out into the open savanna where the predators were waiting. We were forced into a high-stakes gambling match with evolution, where the prize was intelligence and the penalty was death. Then, the world started to burn. The first true turning point in our survival didn't come from a spear or a stone tool. It came from a chemical reaction. Evidence from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa and Kubifora in Kenya suggests that humans began interacting with fire as early as 1.5 to 1.7 million years ago. This changed the rules of the game overnight. Fire did more than just cook food. It created a circle of safety. Most predators have an instinctive, deep-seated fear of fire. It's an unpredictable, destructive force that they cannot fight. By taming it, we created the first artificial habitat in history. A campfire creates a zone where a leopard's night vision, its greatest advantage, is neutralized by a wall of light. It turned the night, which had belonged to the killers for eons, into a time of relative safety for us. Inside that circle of light, we could finally stop looking over our shoulders and start looking at each other. Cooking was the ultimate survival hack. Richard Wrangham, a biological anthropologist at Harvard, argues that cooking was the single most important factor in human survival. By using fire to break down the tough fibers in meat and tubers, we essentially pre-digested our food outside our bodies. This allowed our smaller guts to absorb massive amounts of energy with very little effort. More importantly, it meant we didn't have to spend 6 hours a day chewing like a chimpanzee does. This gave us disposable time. For the first time in millions of years, humans had hours of daylight where they weren't searching for food or hiding. We used that time to experiment, to communicate, and to refine our tools. Fire also allowed us to move into colder climates where the giant tropical predators couldn't follow. We were no longer restricted to the warm cradles of Africa. We were becoming a species that carried its own climate with it in the form of a torch. The heat was our only friend. While fire gave us a defense, we still needed a way to compete on the open savanna during the day. This led to one of the most bizarre and effective adaptations in the animal kingdom: our ability to sweat. Most mammals cool down by panting, which requires them to stop moving or slow down significantly. Humans, however, are covered in 2 to 4 million eccrine sweat glands. We are the only primate that has traded fur for a liquid cooling system. This is the core of the running man hypothesis, championed by biologists Daniel Lieberman and Dennis Bramble. They pointed out that while we are terrible sprinters, we are the greatest long-distance runners on the planet. In the heat of the midday sun, when a saber-toothed cat is forced to lie in the shade to keep its brain from overheating, a human can keep moving. We could literally walk or jog a predator into heat stroke. We turned our physical weakness, our lack of fur and lack of speed, into a specialized weapon of endurance. We became the persistence killers. This endurance allowed for a strategy called persistence hunting, which is still practiced today by the San people of the Kalahari. A hunter identifies a target and begins to follow it. The animal bolts away, easily outrunning the human. But the human doesn't stop. They just keep walking, tracking the animal through the heat. The animal stops to rest, its heart racing, its body temperature climbing. Just as it begins to cool down, the human appears again on the horizon. This cycle repeats for hours, sometimes for an entire day. Eventually, the animal's internal cooling system fails. It collapses from exhaustion and hyperthermia, its muscles seizing up. The human, still sweating and still cool, simply walks up and finishes the job. This was the first time in history that a slow, weak animal could kill a fast, strong one through sheer metabolic dominance. We didn't need to be faster, we just needed to be more patient. But our bodies were still fragile. Even with fire and endurance, a lone human was still a snack for a determined predator. Our real strength was never in our individual bodies. It was in the invisible connections between us. In 2001, a discovery in Dmanisi, Georgia, provided one of the most touching and revealing glimpses into ancient human survival. Researchers found a skull of Homo erectus dating back 1.8 million years. The individual was elderly and had lost all their teeth long before they died. In the wild, a toothless animal is a dead animal. They cannot chew meat, they cannot process plants, and they cannot defend themselves. Yet this individual survived for years in a landscape teeming with giant hyenas and saber-tooths. This means that 1.8 million years ago, someone was caring for them. Someone was chewing their food, protecting them during the night, and carrying them when the group moved. We survived because we cared. This social safety net was a radical departure from the predator's way of life. In a lion pride, a sick or injured member is often abandoned if they become a burden. In the human group, the vulnerable were protected. This wasn't just about kindness, it was a survival strategy. An elderly human who couldn't hunt still possessed something invaluable: memory. They knew where the water holes were during a once-in-a-generation drought. They knew which berries were poisonous and which could heal a wound. By keeping each other alive, we began to accumulate a collective library of knowledge that no single predator could ever match. We stopped evolving through our DNA and started evolving through our culture. We were no longer just a collection of individuals. We were a single, distributed intelligence that was learning how to dismantle the world's dangers. Our brains were the ultimate traps. This collective intelligence led to the development of pattern recognition, a cognitive superpower that turned the environment itself into a weapon. We began to read the newspaper of the savannah. A group of vultures circling in the distance wasn't just birds, it was a map to a fresh kill. A specific bend in the grass wasn't just wind, it was the signature of a crouching cat. We learned to anticipate the predators before they even knew we were there. Anthropologist Pat Shipman argues that this predator-prey relationship actually drove the evolution of our brains. We had to become smarter just to stay one step ahead of the things that wanted to eat us. We started to use this intelligence to build traps. We didn't need to fight a short-faced bear in a fair contest. We could drive it into a muddy pit, or use fire to push it off a cliff, or wait until it was asleep and strike from the shadows. The spears changed the distance of death. For millions of years, if you wanted to kill something, you had to be within reach of its claws. But around 400,000 years ago, we broke that rule. The Schörningen spears, found in Germany, are masterpieces of ancient engineering. These are 6 to 7 foot wooden javelins, balanced like modern Olympic equipment, with the weight forward to allow for accurate throwing. With a spear, a human could stand 30 feet away, well outside the strike zone of a cat, and deliver a lethal blow. We had invented standoff capability. Suddenly, the massive strength and terrifying teeth of the megapredators didn't matter. If they couldn't get close to us, they couldn't kill us. A group of 5 humans with spears and a plan wasn't just a group of prey anymore. They were the most dangerous thing on the planet. The hunters became the hunted. As our tools and social coordination improved, the relationship between humans and predators underwent a violent reversal. We didn't just defend ourselves, we began to systematically eliminate the competition. Paleontologists have long noted a megafauna extinction that follows human migration patterns across the globe. When humans arrived in Europe, the cave lions and giant hyenas began to vanish. When we arrived in North America, the short-faced bear and the saber-toothed cats disappeared. While climate change played a role, the human factor is undeniable. We were no longer competing for food, we were removing threats. We were niche constructors, changing the world to suit our needs rather than changing our bodies to suit the world. The predators that had terrorized our ancestors for 2 million years were suddenly finding themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. We didn't just kill them with weapons. We killed them by stealing their jobs. We were better at finding carrion than the hyenas. We were more efficient at hunting large herbivores than the lions. We took their territory, we took their food, and we destroyed their young. In the natural world, an apex predator depends on a very specific set of conditions to survive. They need a certain density of prey and a certain amount of space. By moving into their territories in large, organized groups, we disrupted the delicate balance they needed to exist. We were a biological, invasive species that the world's greatest killers had no defense against. They were evolved to fight other animals that played by the rules of biology. They weren't prepared for an animal that used fire to turn night into day and stones to kill from a distance. The shadows finally retreated. By 10,000 years ago, the era of the giant predators was over. The world had become a much quieter and much safer place for humans. We had moved from the bottom of the food chain to the very top, not because we grew stronger, but because we grew more connected. We had replaced our missing claws with sharpened flint, and our thin skin with the skins of the very animals that used to hunt us. We had won the long war for survival. But the scars of that war are still written into our very nature. The fear of the dark that so many of us feel is a biological echo from a time when the dark was actually full of things that could eat us. The fight-or-flight response that spikes our heart rate when we hear a sudden noise in the woods is a legacy of the 2 million years we spent as prey. We are a species built by trauma. Our intelligence, our language, our capacity for cooperation, these aren't just cool features of being human. They are survival mechanisms forged in the furnace of extreme predation. We are smart because we had to be. We are social because we couldn't survive alone. We are the survivors of a 2 million year-long horror movie. And the ending is that we didn't just survive the monsters. We became the most terrifying monster of all. We are the only creature on Earth that has the power to decide which other species get to live and which get to die. That is a heavy burden, and it's one that we are still learning how to carry. We have come a long way from the tall grass of the African savanna, but the journey has left its mark on us. The statistics tell the final story. Today, there are roughly 8 billion humans on Earth. There are fewer than 25,000 lions left in the wild. There are maybe 3,000 tigers. The great predators that once held our entire species in a state of constant terror are now fragile populations hanging on by a thread, dependent entirely on our mercy for their continued existence. We have won so thoroughly that we are now in the strange position of trying to protect the very creatures that used to hunt us for sport. It is the ultimate irony of our evolution. The prey has become the guardian. But we should never forget where we came from, or how close we came to never making it at all. You have to remember the 98%. Think back to that feeling of the humid air on your skin and the vibrating growl in your chest. That wasn't a nightmare. It was the daily reality for thousands of generations of your ancestors. Every single one of your relatives, going back millions of years, managed to avoid the teeth of the Dinofelis and the talons of the giant eagle. If even one of them had failed, if just one person in your direct lineage had been a second too slow or a foot too close to the grass, you wouldn't be here today. You are the end result of a million narrow escapes. You are the living proof that a weak animal with a plan can conquer a world of giants. We often wonder what makes us human. Is it our art, our technology, our philosophy? Perhaps. But maybe being human is simpler than that. Maybe being human is the ability to stand in the face of a 98% chance of death and find the 2% chance of survival. It's the ability to look at a world full of monsters and decide that we are going to be the ones who write the story. We were never meant to be the kings of the world, but we are here nonetheless. And that is perhaps the most incredible thing about us. Which of these ancient survival tactics do you think was the most critical? Was it the fire that kept the night at bay, or the social bonds that kept the weak alive? It's a fascinating question because it speaks to what we value most in ourselves today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into our terrifying past, please consider subscribing for more explorations into the secrets of our survival. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of how we became the masters of the Earth, and there are many more mysteries waiting in the shadows. 98%. Never forget that number. It's the measure of just how far we've come. 2 million years ago, you were a snack in the grass, watching the acacia trees shiver. Today, the trees only shiver when you tell them to. The world's deadliest predators are gone, but that low, vibrating hum still echoes in the back of our minds. It's a reminder that we are only here because our ancestors learned to turn the fear into fire. We are the prey that refused to die, and the world has never been the same since. When you look into the dark tonight, remember that your ancestors looked into that same dark and saw a challenge they were determined to meet. They won. And because they won, you get to be the one looking back. That is the definitive closing argument of the human story. We are the ones left standing in the grass.